Hello and welcome to Bedtime Story with Miss Anna. Are you ready to go to sleep? Kiss your mommy, kiss your daddy. It's time for story time. Tonight we have a wonderful book called Little People Big Dreams. Anne Frank. Anne was a little Jewish girl who was born in Germany. She lived happily with her parents and her older sister, Margot, in the city of Frankfurt. But when she was 4, an ugly man with a little black mustache became a leader of her country. His name was Hitler. He hated the Jews and wanted them to disappear. Anne's family moved away to Holland, which was a free country. Anne's father opened a business and they had a home where they felt safe. But one day the Nazis invaded half of Europe and arrived in Holland. Anne and all the other Jewish children were forced to go to separate school and wear a star on their chests. For her 13th birthday, Anne's parents gave her a diary. That day she discovered the pleasure of writing on her own. Anne wrote in her diary about how her family lived in fear of being arrested. They decided to leave their home and move to a secret annex behind a bookshelf at the building where her father worked. They had to share their tiny new home with another Jewish family and stay very quiet. They could not leave their hiding place in case anyone found them. Anne's diary kept her company and she wrote in 4 hours. She wanted to publish a book and become a famous artist. But one day, Anne stopped writing. The Nazi soldiers had found them and they were all arrested. Anne's diary was left behind in her room. The family was pushed onto a train full of people on its way to a concentration camp. It took 3 long days for them to arrive at the worst place on earth. Anne's father, Otto, was the only member of the family to survive the terrible war. He found her diary and wept as he read what his young daughter had written. He decided to publish the diary and share Anne's story, just as she would have wanted. The world have to know the true story. Since then, millions of people have read and cried over the diary of Anne Frank, the story of the little girl who dreamed of a better world. This is Anne Frank, born in 1929, died in 1945. We have one more story, Little People Big Dreams, Audrey Hepburn. Little Audrey lived in a town called Arnhem in the Netherlands. She dreamed of what she would do when she grew up. Will she become a ballerina or maybe an actress? But one day, on her way to ballet class, Audrey saw soldiers on the street. War had broken out. She watched many families being sent away from their homes, including children just like her. It was a hard time for Audrey and all of the children. There was very little food and they were often hungry. Audrey became ill. At last, the fighting ended and Audrey moved to London to study dance. Her teacher said she was too weak from the war to become a ballerina, but Audrey didn't give up. She decided to act and dance in musicals instead. Before long, she was making her first Hollywood film, driving around Rome with the famous actor Gregory Peck. Every role she played was different from the one before. One day she was a nun, and the next a princess. She had a simple rule for life: dance as though no one is watching, sing as though no one can hear you, live as though heaven is on earth. She also liked to spend time alone in her apartment. Every day at breakfast, she read letters from her fans. She was loved by millions of people around the world. Audrey won award after award, but she worried that she didn't deserve them. While she was a Hollywood star who seemed to have everything, She never forgot that there were children in the world who were hungry just like she had been. One day, a charity offered her a new role. They asked her to become their official ambassador and visit children all over the world. So Audrey traveled to India and to Africa. Wherever she went, Audrey tried to make every child happy. She helped raise money to provide children with water, food, and medicine. Audrey spent the rest of her life helping people across the globe, and that made her happier than acting or dancing ever had. This is Audrey Hepburn, born in 1929, died in 1993. I have one more book for you tonight. This is from Little People, Big Dreams, Agatha Christie. Little Agatha and her mother read a book together every afternoon. Agatha always had a better idea for how the story should end. In bed, Agatha kept on reading until she fell asleep. Detective novels were her favorite. But then a war started, and young Agatha had to put her books aside. It was time for her to help wounded soldiers in the hospital. But Agatha's imagination wouldn't stay quiet. As a nurse, she learned about poisons and toxic potions, which could cause someone to meet an unfortunate end. After the war, Agatha used what she had learned to write her own story. They always started with a mysterious murderer who could solve such a terrible crime. Agatha invented Hercule Poirot, a detective able to decipher any dastardly deed. Carrying her typewriter, Agatha traveled the world. People read with wonder as pirates solved crime after crime. Agatha reached the Middle East, where she was inspired to write a mystery that pirates couldn't crack. She invented Miss Marple to take the case. She looked more like a granny than a detective, but Agatha knew that appearance could be deceiving. And soon everyone loved Miss Marple as much as Pirate. They read Agatha's adventures before going to bed. And gulp and gasp at them in the theater. Agatha wrote more than 100 books and invented enough victims to fill a cemetery, but she was always pondering her next mystery. Luckily, Agatha knew that any mystery can be solved if you use your imagination. This is Agatha Christie, born in 1890, died in 1976. Our last book for tonight is called Little People, Big Dreams, Astrid Lindgren. Little Astrid lived with her parents and siblings on an old farm near Vimmerby, a small town in Sweden. Her childhood was very happy, so happy that she never wanted to grow up. When she was 4, her friend Edith read Astrid a story. In an instant, the room was filled with giants, witches, and fairies. They appeared from an object she hadn't really seen before, a book. Astrid did her best to learn how to read. Once she started, she couldn't stop, for her books were almost unbelievable wonderful. Before long, she had read her way through the library's collection. One morning she woke up with a terrible feeling. Life suddenly seemed so complicated, and she didn't want to play with toys as she always had. Astrid was growing up. But being a young adult meant that she could be a rebel. Astrid was the first girl in town to cut her hair short. She then landed her first job at a newspaper. At age 19, she became a single mom when her son Lars was born. After a while, Astrid got married and had her second child named Karin. Astrid was no ordinary mother. She loved playing just like a child and was great at inventing stories. One night, Karen got sick and asked her mother for a get well story about Pippi Longstocking, a funny name she had just made up. What a remarkable name, Astrid thought. She must be a remarkable girl, too. Pippi was more than remarkable. She was everything a child wanted to be. She lived alone with a monkey and a horse in Bikeluka, her own cottage. She was free, happy, fearless, and the strongest girl in the world. For many years, Astrid made up stories about Pippi for Karen and all her friends. For Karen's 10th birthday, Astrid put them down on a paper as a present for her. From beginning to end, Pippi's stories were delightful. She was wise, honest, and wild. As soon as her first book was published, she became a heroine for readers all around the world. Astrid wrote many novels and picture books about Pippi, which were translated into more than 100 languages. When Pippi made it to TV screen, Astrid worked on the screenplays, which became an important part of her work. She created dozens of other memorable characters like Ramus, Ronja, Emil, and Lola. Astrid received the highest recognitions for her contribution to the world of books, two Hans Christian Andersen medals. A Russian astronomer even named a planet in her honor, Planet 3204 Lindgren. And still today, little Astrid, the girl who never wanted to grow up, lives in our heads and hearts when anyone reads Pippi Longstocking, who's always up for some fun. This is Astrid Lindgren, born in 1907, died in 2002. I hope that you enjoyed the bedtime story for today celebrating Women's History. Good night. Don't forget to subscribe. Good night. Good night.